My name is Lee Center. I got into the water damage business in 1978. Yes, so I've been doing water damage longer than some of you have been alive. And things have changed quite dramatically since 1978. It used to be that, we would actually shove the water into the baseboards and hope everything dried and, open the windows and doors, etc. Things have evolved quite a bit since then. I started in the carpet cleaning industry because back in those days, the people who did water damage, fire remediation, carpet cleaning, etc., were all carpet cleaners because we're the only people who had that equipment. Now things have evolved quite dramatically and this is a standalone business in its own. Still in this day and age, it's been my experience that people doing multi-res, whether or not it's a facility going this way or up and down, which in the city of Toronto, of course, or the GTA itself, we have, 4,000 multi-res buildings that are multi-story already to start with. It's really important to look at water damage from the paradigm of a commercial dryer. So many times people call their insurance companies and the insurance companies dispatch somebody who is a residential dryer, and it's a major problem. They do not understand the unique sets of circumstances that we're going to see in multi-res or industrial, and it just ends up being an event that could have been taken care of properly in a week and is going on for 3 or 4 months in some cases. Okay, so I'm going to look at it how you guys can break things up in your mind and, looking at it from the point of view of what standard operating procedures would be, if that's okay with everybody. And if you do have more questions about this, my card is attached. If you're really, really interested, I do teach water damage restoration classes for a certification that a lot of people send people out to get a broader scope of what we're talking about. And this would be a prerequisite for some further certifications, which we call commercial drying specialists. I want to really get into this really quickly though. There is a standard of care for water damage, and it is called the S500 Standard for Water Damage Remediation. I am the vice chair of standards for this anti-standard setting organization. Ironically, 2 days ago, I lose track on weeks like this. Tuesday, we just started a new standard called the S550, which is going to be a water damage standard for commercial drying, which is about time. But in the meantime, we're stuck with residential guys doing a lot of commercial drying, which is probably our biggest problem. This document is live, so we are constantly updating this document. We typically are supposed to do it every 5 years, but with the advent of all the new technologies that we're using, including Bluetooth-enabled meters, etc., we are actually reviewing these documents faster. So yes, right now, most of our documentation can be done by Bluetooth, and we're even getting so ready for this. We are so young now that we're inventing meters that attach to a selfie stick. So if I want to see if something is wet on the roof, we take our selfie stick, attach it to the meter, and go along the roof like that. It's pretty cool, actually. I never thought I would buy a selfie stick, but I guess I am going to. And if I start doing selfies, please kill me. That would be good. Anyways, the levels of importance in this document. So if you actually look at this document or any of our documents, we use 5 phrases that you shall do something. That means the law or Mother Nature says that that's the way it works. It's some natural law or regulatory law. A should is something that's compulsory by the people who wrote the document. A recommended is a watered down version of a should. We strongly recommend that you do this, but we're not going to make it absolute standard of care. And then we use terms like may and can, which are just permissive that you could do something in the water damage industry, but it is not a part of the standard of care. It helps to know those words if reading our documents. The purpose of this is, as you can see, for water damage investigations and contamination and establishing the restoration plans. Typically, you guys, if you are looking at writing standard operating procedures, etc., one of the biggest issues that we're going to have is that we can't write you a scope of work in time to properly mitigate the loss. You understand? So I'm walking into your place, there's water everywhere. If you don't have a decision maker saying, yes, you can extract this water right now, or yes, you can flip the carpet tiles over right now, if you don't have that in place, the plan is going to change quite dramatically. The number one thing, if you were going to write down on a slide, when it comes to this business continuity aspect of water damage, et cetera, you have to assign a decision maker, and that person needs to be empowered. If you guys are going to wait even a day, all the glue underneath your carpet tiles have gone to milky guck, which means now I have to lift all those carpet tiles, scrape off the glue, put on new glue, and of course it takes weeks to do, and move all the furniture and everything. So having a decision maker is very important. So the purpose of our document is very, very vague on that, because we want you guys to have standard operating procedures and decision makers. The application is primarily for the restoration people, but also secondarily for those who investigate and prepare restoration specifications. It's been my experience that so many of you are using a third-party evaluator such as Pinchin Environmental, Safe Tech, one of these environmental companies, to decide how to do the work. I cannot blame you, okay? What I do have a problem with is when you guys wait for these people to arrive and write a report and submit it to you in 2 days. Because after the drywall's been wet for 2 days, the first thing they're going to tell you is to rip out all that drywall. It's been wet for 2 days. Yes or no? One of my friendly competitors, is sort of silly, isn't it? If we were allowed to do our work at the beginning, in 2 days it would probably be dry and we'd be taking our equipment out. Instead, things get wet, and they're wet for 2 days, and by the time you get your report, we're told to rip everything out because it's wet. So this is also for potentially materially interested parties, such as consumers, occupants, and property managers, etc. Strongly recommend buying the document. It costs not even $100. The main thing that you should be aware of is that we as water damage restorers look at things from 3 different categories. In other words, how we're going to approach a job revolves around 3 different categories of water. It used to be called clean water, gray water, and black water. Those are obsolete terms now, because the color of the water has 0 to do with the degree of contamination of the water. Okay? So if you have water that originates from a clean source, we call that a Category 1 water loss, or clean water. Believe it or not, in most Category 1 water losses, I can dry this in place with minimal or no disruption. Okay? Will the water change state? Yes, the water will change state with time and temperature. So in other words, again, if you have a small little water loss and you are going to call an environmental company and not do anything until you receive the report, by the time we receive the report, now it's a Category 2 water loss. So responding quickly is vital in this business, and allowing the restorer to do their work immediately is vital. Okay? Category 2, so Category 1 water is clean or sort of clean. And there's many different versions of clean, and I wish I had lots of time to talk about it because I have silly jokes about it. It actually draws a good laughter, and I like being laughed at. So, but I don't have time for that. Category 2 water is dirty or filthy dirty. Okay, so what's the difference? If you have clean and dirty, what could be the difference? Well, Category 3 water losses are contaminated with pathogens. Pathogens, in other words, things that can cause disease inside of you, can cause illness or even death. That, in other words, anything that comes up the drains, whether or not it's a floor drain, your toilet, your sinks, etc., this is deemed to be pathogenic. Things that can cause disease, can kill somebody in some cases, etc., and should be dealt with totally differently than anything else. Okay? So it's a lot more to it. And then clean or not clean. And unfortunately, what happens? Do people get preyed on for their fears in these situations? All the time. Oh, that's dirty water. You would never drink that. It would, if you drank that, you'd probably want to throw up. Everything's got to come out. No, that's not true. We have ways of cleaning these things up quite effectively that will allow people to continue on and work. Now, if it's your policy that everything's being torn out, that's another story. But the main thing that you need to be able to identify within a water loss and how you're going to write your standard operating procedures really does revolve around these categories of water loss. And I can tell you right now, any environmental company that has water that's coming up the drains, et cetera, is going to insist that anything that absorbs moisture is going to be torn out, okay? That's probably the only consistent across the board when it comes to water damage. This slide is constantly referred to in our industry by people who've been doing this for 30 years. You ever hear that? I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been doing this for 40 years. I say, oh, that's nice, yeah. You know, and I'm telling you, does anybody have a new car that would bring their car into a mechanic who hasn't taken a class in 30, 40 years? I don't think so. And you know, the problem that we have is we have an industry full of people who do not get their education upgraded, and they still refer to this slide on a regular basis, that the clean water that came from the supply line to the water maker, that went all over the floor and sat there for 2 days, is automatically category 2, and it's in our documents. I want to point out that document has not been, this page has not been in our document for 10 years. If somebody is sitting there telling you that they have to pull everything out based on the fact that water changes state over 48 hours, that just means they haven't been in a class for 10 years, because we've changed things quite dramatically. Can things change state? Sure. In particular when it comes to carpet, right? The big thing about carpet in our industry is what? It's very good at what it gets blamed for. It's blamed for trapping and holding dirt, and it does a really good job at that. So if I get water on a dirty carpet and it's allowed to sit there, would I maybe want to change the category of water loss or look at how to deal with my water loss differently? Sure, I can understand that. Still, does that take an effect just like that? No. If somebody gets in there and again deals with this in a timely manner and gets some air movement down on there, it might smell a tiny bit for the first several hours, and they can put a deodorizer down there, no disinfectant, and tomorrow morning it should be fine. If you arrive the next morning and it stinks, it's usually because something is still wet, right? Or you might have something that's really, really, really dirty. And you know, just because something smells doesn't mean that it's filthy dirty. You know, I don't know if anybody's been like me and forgotten their laundry in the washing machine overnight. Am I the only person who's done that? No. And when you open up that laundry in the morning, does that laundry very frequently still have a smell to it? Yes or no? It was just freshly laundered. That's because wet things smell. So, you know, you can, depending on the paradigm of who you have doing water damages, it makes a big difference, right? If I walk in on day 2 and I smell something, the first thing I said, I missed something. Or there's a wall over some other wall somewhere and I better find out what's still wet before it's too late, right? Other people walk in and go, mold. Now, I know you would never say that word in your facility because you're probably going to have a frickin' evacuation, yes or no? Oh my God. And you know, I know it's politically incorrect to say this, but I'm telling you, some people, you know, they have antennas. So you can be on the 18th floor, and if the guy on the first floor says any word that sounds like gold, hold, behold, or something like that, is all hell's broken loose, yes or no? It's really funny the way that works. So we never say that word. I even heard somebody in Moncton last week, I was teaching a class there, and they said, yeah, the environmentalists here call it yogurt. I say, well, I don't see how that works. Yeah, there's some yogurt on the wall, you know, as if that's not going to draw attention, but you know, that's anyways. I cannot put enough emphasis that water can change state, but it does take some time. It doesn't happen in an hour. There might be some severe circumstances where it'll change state really quickly, but typically 3 to 10 hours for that water to really change state, even on a filthy car. The initial inspection. This is where I think a lot of you guys get ripped off. I watch some of our competitors come in because I do work for ourselves directly with facility managers, and I also do a lot of work with some of the major janitorial companies out there. And so sometimes we're called in by the janitorial company and we'll be there doing our work and we see our competitor come in as the facility management company has called them in. And they're walking around with their meters, seeing what's wet. Oh, that's wonderful, and I can understand that. But in the meantime, the water continues to go down and this way. You understand what I mean? The initial scope should be done by the people who are actually doing the extraction, in my opinion. Okay? Do you want to write up a scope of work and have somebody decide on it right away. If you're doing that, it's probably turning into a major event. So in my opinion, if you're writing up scopes of work or standard operating procedures on how to deal with these things, you really do need to decide who the decision maker is, at what point they have authority to make decisions, etc., and learn the little things that are going to cause real heartache in your business, okay? I can guarantee you the two major things immediately will be insulated walls and carpet tiles. Carpet tiles are a nightmare and very easy to deal with if I'm doing it right away. And I know I've said this already, but I cannot put enough emphasis. If the people coming in and doing work for you are not worried about the carpet tiles walking in there, you can be assured that they're looking to run this bill way up, because that's what will happen. Okay, so the initial inspection is important. This will vary from place to place. For example, you were talking about strip malls, etc. I'd be immediately worried about the Subway subs or the Tim Hortons or something like that. They're famous for having a little bit of water leakage underneath the walls and into the unit next to it. And then we go in there for a water damage, find some of that M word. We won't say that word that starts with M, that you shall not speak. And if I don't get on top of that right away and it's allowed to sit there for a couple of days, will that be a major problem in a food processing restaurant? Yeah. So, again, there's many ways of looking how to write a scope of work and what to look at first in the initial inspection. And again, if you are looking for guidance on things like this, I'd be happy to sit down with anybody and help look at those situations for you. Ongoing inspections. One of the biggest issues that we see and are sort of the customers don't want to do them are daily inspections. So when I am trying to dry something in place, say for example, I am trying to get this one little spot here dry. You do realize I can put an air mover and have it aimed right at that spot, put cones around it, do not touch, okay? And of course, what will happen the next day? The janitorial company's taken it away and put it to the side, okay? Daily inspections are really important for us, and the placement of equipment is very important for us because, again, if we're allowed to do these inspections and manipulate our equipment, we can usually be out of a place that has carpet and drywall, you're not going to believe this, in 3 days. All about having standard operating procedures, all about us getting in there the next day and manipulating things around and checking. Principles of drying. So number one thing is to remove the excess water. It's very important to understand how important that is. I'll give you an example. If I spilled some water on this table with a glass of water right now, I spilled some water on there, would that water evaporate? Sure. It would take a while for it to evaporate, yes or no? If I were to spill some water in there, take a cloth, put the cloth down on the water, and go like this. Think about what would happen. For a split second, I would see that water spread across the table, yes or no? And it would flash off, just like that, yes or no? Just as if it was rubbing alcohol. When water molecules are 5 layers thick, 5 molecules thick or less, it is as volatile as rubbing alcohol. So the importance of removing as much water in the liquid phase before it gets deeply set, I can't put enough emphasis on that. There's just the number one thing to do. And again, it depends on who you hire, right? If you hire a company that's full of a bunch of guys who are carpet cleaners for 20 years, these guys can push a carpet cleaning wand and suck up the water for hours upon end, and it's not going to bother them. If you're hiring a construction company who's got a carpenter who's used one of those machines before, I can promise you they're never going to remove as much water as the guy who's been cleaning carpets for 20 years. So who you choose in that respect makes a huge difference, okay? Enhancing evaporation. It's really funny watching some of my competitors' literature and how many dehumidifiers they have and how many of this they have and how many of that they have. And I look at them straight out and I say, okay, hold on. So you're trying to tell me that you're going to dry it with all this stuff? Yes. Okay. So I don't know about you, if I got something wet in my house, what would be the first thing I'd want to do? If I got my feet wet and my socks were wet, would I, put it in front of a fan, or would I warm them up? Most people here would warm it up, yes or no? There is no emphasis on warming things up here. It is shocking. So you have water that goes from one bathroom to the next bathroom to the next bathroom in some high-rise building, okay? And what happens, the people are going to dry it with a few air movers and a little dehumidifier. Okay. If that was me, I would probably want to get a little heat along that wall. Just put a little loose plastic to keep the heat up against the wall, and guess what? I just saved your $60,000 bathroom. I know there's no money in it for me. That's why I'm just wearing this regular shirt here. Can't afford a tie. I'm just teasing, but I'm just trying to give you some ideas on what makes a difference between a true facility dryer and a guy who does insurance work, who is called by the insurance company to come and do work. Big difference, okay? Removing that water vapor, yeah? So, and don't get me wrong, I love your money, and I would love to put 100 dehumidifiers in your building and make money on the rental of them every day. It's great money, and do I have to do that to a certain extent? Yes. But you guys also have this thing called a building operator, which I'm pretty sure from his own home can reroute the air handling system so it's exhausting a ton of moisture, yes or no? I know there's no money in it for me on that, but when you know how to dry a building like that, exhausting that moisture, especially on day one, through just proper manipulation of the air handling system, can save a lot of time again and money. Controlling the temperature. Don't crank the heat. Don't turn on the air conditioning. That's the biggest problem that you guys are going to have, right? If I heat everything up, everybody wants to turn the air conditioning on. If I turn the air conditioning on, what happens? That humidity hits the air conditioning ducts and it starts to rain on your ceiling tiles, and then think you got a new water loss in there. So that's probably the biggest headache that you're going to have. So typically when you have the most heavily affected areas, that's a good time to have people work from home or relocate temporarily, okay? Because you can get what we call secondary damage from, turning on the air handling system. So, just exhaust that moisture out, but don't turn on the heat or the air conditioning. If it's too hot, then our machines don't work as well, and if it's too cold, you're going to get dew. The effect on moisture on materials. This is the one that kills me the most, and it's funny the way it works. We've gone from calling it drywall to paper-covered gypsum. Okay? And why do we say that? Because could this whole business change immediately overnight if we all started using drywall that didn't have paper on the cover, on it? Oh yeah. And why do people not buy drywall with paper on it, without paper on it? Because the drywall with paper on it is cheaper. And you know why the drywall with paper on it is cheaper? Because they sell more of it. So a simple change in paradigm, if somebody were to ever bother just saying, okay, we're going to, sell drywall with no paper on it for a while, bring the sales up, then, people like me would have less business. I really don't care about that because I'm more worried about the health and safety of people. And, the paper on the drywall is the first thing that is going to mold if not taken care of properly. Other things that I see all the time, I don't know if you've gone through these situations before, the famous one. The laminate is wet, it's toast. We'll have to tear it all out. You hear that all the time, yeah? Well, if I went down to Rona and paid 79 cents a square foot, or Lumber Liquidators at 79 cents a square foot, yeah, that laminate might be toast, just from the guy mopping the floor. But a lot of these high-end laminates have wonderful HDF cores, Opti cores that are resistant to water for 30 years. Did I say 30 years? Sorry about that. So again, and it's, well, how would I be able to tell that from the top side, et cetera? You can't tell that by looking at it. I say, yeah, that's fine. That's fine in theory, but anybody who's done this business for any period of time would just pop off a baseboard where it's wet and try and unclick the laminate. And if it won't unclick anymore, it's been water damage, right? The tongue and groove is swollen into each other and won't come out anymore. And if it will unclick, it means that it's not affected yet, and maybe I can lift that up and save that floor. God forbid, that we would actually not want to throw all this stuff in the garbage and not turn somebody's life and office upside down for the sake of making a few dollars. So, and I'm talking about this from the point of view of, how to put somebody back into business really quickly and relatively painlessly. So this is the old flow chart that we sort of teach from. At the top, of course, are the 3 mitigating factors on how I'm going to proceed. The degree of contamination, which is at category 1, 2, or 3. The damage. If something is damaged, obviously, it's going to speed things up if I remove things that are already damaged because I don't have to dry them out. And then, of course, the cost. Please do not spend $200 to try and save something that's worth $100. Those are the 3 criteria that they should be dealing from at the beginning. To the far left, you need to determine what is wet. The people doing the extraction are probably the best person to do that. Number 2, how wet is it? We must use readings. Okay, we must take readings. Your insurance company is going to want that. Your risk management department is going to want that. Pension Environmental and all their other, the Safe Techs and T. Harris's and all these other companies are going to want that and maybe make their own records, etc. So we need those records for, documenting what was wet in the first place. And then when I come back tomorrow, when I use the same meter in the same place, I have a record of the readings today. And hopefully I see that the moisture content of the materials are going down. Okay? And this is one of the big issues that we see over a period of time. A lot of people will use, the small janitorial company. They've got all the equipment. They want to give them a shot, etc. And then all of a sudden they do the whole job and don't have the proper documentation and records, and risk management's going, ape poop over this, and so you really have to be conscious of records, okay? And are we done? There's a big myth out there. They're trying to tell me, almost every restorer I say, I take my meter and go to the wall here and it says it's 10. Does that mean I have to dry it to 10? No. 10 or 11 is good enough. It's going to equal, acclimatize over a period of time. Okay, things like wood. You try and dry the wood to what's dry, you might be there for a long time. And I've seen lawsuits where somebody's sitting there suing somebody for 3 weeks worth of trying to dry the wood, and they didn't even realize that, the dry standard for wood is 4 percentage points, and give it some time to acclimate and everything will be fine. So again, whenever somebody is doing these records for you, not only should they be taking care of the moisture records for you, they should also be telling you what point they want to dry it up to. Okay, if they're not doing that, again, they really don't know what they're doing. How can I dry things from a restorative point of view? Again, lowering the humidity in the affected area can work, especially when we get what's called deeply bound moisture. Where am I going to find deeply bound moisture? Any type of concrete. In your buildings there, cinder block. Those dividing walls that have cinder block are a freaking nightmare because they hold a ton of moisture. And the biggest issue that you're going to see, somebody's taking one of these little meters and walk up there, oh, it's dry. Well, that meter only measures 3/4 of an inch to an inch down. And the cinder block has got a big hollow cavity like that with maybe 1 liter of water in it. The outside is dry now, and guess what? If you leave it sit there for a couple of days, does that moisture start coming back out? And of course, we want to put this whole thing behind us and get it all done with. So we'll put the drywall up over the weekend, and guess what? A year or 2 years down the road, there's mold there. I can't understand why. It was dry when we put the stuff back up on. Happens all the time. So again, it's really, really important when drying those what we call hard to dry items. Plywood, concrete, cinder block, plaster. If you're in these old downtown buildings, plaster is another huge one. These items need ultra dry, ultra warm air to be able to pull that moisture out. And you should be able to use, I wish I had brought it. I have some new little things also. There comes with the selfie stick meters that we can actually drill a hole in and put this little probe in and see if it's wet in there. All kinds of new toys coming out. Most of these are going to be out to the public in March. Using outside air where possible. The insurance companies do have fixed rates on what they will pay, okay? The residential people are strictly bound to that. The commercial environment should not be, okay? If I am following the insurance business price list, then inevitably I'm going to be putting a ton of dehumidifiers in your place whether you need them or not, because that's the only way I'll make some money, okay? Things will take a long time doing this also. If you pay me a reasonable rate and I give you a rate, which is probably maybe $12 an hour more than what the insurance company wants to pay, then your net bill is going to be lower because I'll start using things like outside air to dry the place out. Why would that work? Well, you know, the world is perfect. I didn't say the people in the world are perfect, okay? But the world is perfect. And what do I mean by that? That the laws of thermodynamics state that high humidity will seek out low humidity. So, you know, if I'm in a strip mall or, you know, a shopping center that's got a Dominion at one end, or I guess there's no Dominion, Metro at one end, and, you know, all kinds of series of stores in there. If I opened a loading dock door and had a giant fan blowing that air outside, you trying to tell me it's not going to dry quickly? Of course it's going to. But there's no money in that. People aren't doing it for the sole reason that they're trying to put their dehumidifiers in there to make money, okay? I cannot put enough emphasis on using drier air. Now, some people will say, oh, well, the air outside is really humid, it won't dry it out. Well, that's not necessarily true either. You know, when we have hurricanes down throughout the Caribbean, I promise you, they're drying out those buildings and those high-rise hotels along the strip, et cetera, without using dehumidifiers. You know, it's capturing the prevailing winds and, you know, getting flow through the place. That's going to make a huge difference, okay? So again, I'm just giving you, you know, I could talk about this obviously probably for a month and still have something new to talk about. But what I'm trying to do is give you those little triggers. Is the person that you're using some of these lines that I'm mentioning? If they are, you know that there's a cheaper way of doing it. How about that, okay? And a more effective way of doing it. Disruptive drying revolves around any time we're going to take a material off, cut it out, or put a hole in it. Now, I know most of you, if you've ever been through a water damage restoration event, you see the guys come in and they take off the baseboards and then they drill holes in the wall, right? I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah. Well, what a scam that one is. So they're trying to make you believe now that they've got this air mover that's blowing up against the wall at around 3,200 CFM, and that the air is slowing down when it hits the wall and hanging a left through that 3/8 inch of a hole, right? And they got most of us convinced that that's exactly what's happening. Yeah. If you look scientifically, the reason we take the baseboards off is because the bottom of the drywall has no paint on it. It dries really easily. You know how easy drywall dries? I'm not word of a lie. If I had 2 layers of brown paper bag put together, it's got a permeability of 42. That's its permeance rating. Well, half-inch drywall has a permeance rating of 40. So am I saying drywall without a sealer on it dries at the same rate as a double layer of brown paper bag? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, without holes. Why do we put the holes in there? To make you feel better, so you can get your head around that that we're getting air in there. I'm just letting you know, that's a fact, and I can document that for you if you really wanted to, okay? Why do we put a couple of holes in at the beginning? Because I want to peek inside and see, is it insulated? Or if you have an older building, you know how many of these older buildings that they'll have an old wall in there with asbestos-containing material in the drywall compound, right? Okay. And then, you know, you say, okay, let's do this properly. I would like a quote on removing that. And, you know, and then when you get the quote and you're released from the hospital from the heart attack that you had, at seeing the cost to do this properly, does that sort of sound familiar? Yeah. You say, well, rather than doing this properly like that, I'm just going to build a wall over it. So am I saying that it's not uncommon in a lot of these buildings downtown that we see walls built over walls just because of asbestos containing material inside? All the time. How do I tell if something is in there? Again, taking off the baseboards, making little holes, and intruding inside and seeing what's in there for real. If I can't do that everywhere, on day 2 when I come in and I smell something still, still smells a bit musty, I've missed something. I have to look a bit deeper. Does that start to make sense? This is, if you really want to do disruptive, in-place drying and dry things out without tearing everything apart, there's lots of ways of doing it when you're using a true commercial dryer, or you can use the insurance company who sent, and hopefully they had some commercial drying experience. So they do say removing baseboards is disruptive. I just say it's prudent, okay? So I don't count removing baseboards as being disruptive drying. Aggressive drying is usually only used on clean water losses category 1 or category 2 water losses. Now, I want to go into this a tiny bit further. So what happens? Category 2 water can be dirty and not stink, and it can be dirty and stink. I don't know if you've ever smelled water that comes out of some of the fire suppression systems or an aquarium or water bed. This water can be really, really foul. Some people interpret that as being grossly contaminated. No, it just smells, and typically if we can't get rid of smell, we cut things out. But for those category 2 water losses that don't smell, can I dry them in place? Absolutely. Don't kid yourself. We can wash them down and it's not going to be an issue. Now, classes of water. Believe it or not, most people who go into your places to install drying equipment do it based on the fact of how many plugs you have in the wall. I hate to tell you that. They will put in as much equipment as they can plug in without blowing a circuit. Okay? It's pretty scary. There is actually a calculation to figure out how many dehumidifiers to put in there and how many air movers to put in there. People should be able to substantiate that to you at any given time. Okay? A class 1 water loss is where you have minimal amount of moisture putting up in the air. It has nothing to do with size. So say, for example, you have a room this size that has carpet in it. Will that carpet suck up a lot of water? Yes or no? Sure. And this is a nice hospitality style carpet. It's probably got an attached backing on it. It's going to hold a ton of moisture. If this same room had ceramic tile in there or vinyl, after the water damage, somebody did a good extraction, there's no water left. Right? Ceramic tile is another good example. The stupidest business deal I ever made. I made a deal with a guy. You drop out of this tender and I'll give you all my floods. I go, okay. Sounds like a good deal. Glue down carpet, if it's not, you're not talking about carpet tiles, you're just talking about broadloom glued down. Unitary is super easy, and it depends on the quality of your commercial carpet, but typically most glue down carpets are easily salvageable. The big issue that we have is at the seams. If the seams weren't seam sealed, water will get down in there. So what happens now is most of the carpet has got the glue that holds it together is cut with a clay and marble dust. So water can affect it that way, but generally speaking, very easy to dry. So this dumb deal I made with this company, they gave me all their floods and they did the janitorial services in Home Depot and Loblaws, which of course, Loblaws has got vinyl with that much wax on it, it will never get wet, and Home Depot's got polished concrete. So I thought I had made such a great deal, and I just realized that I, got dibs to water damages that probably didn't need my services. Okay? Dumb deal I made. So probably, maybe the second best, dumbest deal I ever did, but we'll talk about that in another day. Class 2 water losses are where you have a substantial amount of moisture, typically a lot of hygroscopic materials. Those are things that hold and retain moisture, things like carpet and drywall, but less than 40% of the area is affected. So what we call that is that the walls haven't gotten wet past my knees. That's where that 40% figure comes from, so to speak. If the water gets wet, if the walls get wet above my knees, then I need different air movers, because the air movers are on ground level, they're taking care of the lower 2 feet. I need to have air movers up against the wall, so it's different calculation. Class 3 are those areas that are above 2 feet. Class 4 are specialty drying, hardwood, and big one. I know a lot of people like to say, oh, I just got to watch what I say about buildings, but we had some floods not this past August, the previous August, right down through the downtown core, and a large number of these high-rise buildings, 60-story buildings, who had granite all over the ground floor. We're told, don't worry about the granite, don't worry about the granite. It can't get damaged by this water. Take care of everything else everywhere else. And I don't know if you know which buildings I'm talking about. Of course, did that granite get water marked everywhere and look really, really ugly and ended up having to be torn out? Yeah. So, again, especially when you have items that can get wet, but it gets deeply bound inside, that can be some of the most challenging stuff to do. And unfortunately, I have to say I couldn't even save one of those myself. And they say I can dry almost anything. This one I couldn't. I had to sort of, after 4 weekends, throw my hands up in the air, and it costs an insurance company a lot of money, and it cost the building a lot of downtime, and et cetera. So this is the second point that any restorer should be talking to you. So, you have a flood, you say, okay, what's going on? They should be able to tell you, well, we have a Category 1 water loss with a Class 4 drying procedure. Some areas are pretty dirty, so I'm going to treat it as a Category 2 water loss. If they're not talking to you in this term, then, or you're not asking the questions, then you might be being taken advantage of a tiny bit. Let me put it that way, okay? Again, the whole aspect of restore now or restore later. I can't even save wood. If you have wooden floors in certain suites, you call in, Lee, I have a water damage that's affected, 987. By the way, 7 has got some hardwood in there. Bring your machine now. If you tell me you have hardwood in a high-rise building, which is not that normal, right? And I'm bringing my machinery with me, the chances of me being able to fix that in a timely manner are probably 300% greater than if I had to go back to my shop and get that stuff, okay? So it's really weird that way that works too. People are always looking at it, we'll take care of the carpet, we'll take care of this first, but they don't realize the realities of dealing with wood, laminates, and even vinyls. Yeah. Restore later, this is self-explanatory. So this is what we're talking about. And it all really has to do with time, okay? You have water on the surface is surface water. Water that's free to come in and out of these things, that's fairly easy to dry, is called free water. And the water that's deeply bound inside is that bound water, and that's the hard stuff to dry. Again, most water doesn't get deeply bound right away. It takes time. So I can't put enough emphasis, again, if your company procedures revolve around wait for the report from the environmental company, you're probably dealing with a lot of bound water, a lot of time to do that, a lot of energy, a lot of everything. Your point of view as facility managers, et cetera, should always be to prevent getting deeply bound water, no matter what. It's all about attitude. When people are walking in here, it's amazing how I look at it. So I walk into one building once, and I saw a desk. And it was starting to get wet. And I said, look, we better get that desk up right now. And he said, oh, don't worry about it. Just, worry about the important stuff. I said, well, hold on for a minute. That desk, the designer's laughing at me right now. Sorry, I didn't know your name, but she's laughing. So you have 60 desks there that all look the same, and one's about to get damaged. Is it going to be a big deal if that 60th desk doesn't match the rest? Well, to the designer it will, right? And the last I heard, the designers have a lot of pull in these buildings. It's really funny how much pull the designers have in these buildings. There's lots of ways of looking at these things also when it comes to your attitude. Is your attitude that you are going to try and save something? Or is your attitude of, I don't care because I make no money off of it, okay? I always look at it from the point of view of I want to do what my mother would expect me to do, which is usually to do the right thing and save things. Special situations. Please, when I arrive at your site, I need access to your asbestos survey. You don't have your asbestos survey ready for me, it's a problem. Hopefully it's with security or whoever's, the operator has access to that. We'd prefer to get the asbestos survey sent to us with the work order, by email. Does that make all the difference in the world? Yes, because again, especially if you've got, buildings up and down this Bay King corridor, et cetera, some of those buildings have 5 layers of asbestos in there. Would that help me to know at the beginning? Sure. Because I could super bake that out in a day, if I knew, and get it really, really dry, really, really fast using some fancy procedures. And if not, 3-4 layers of asbestos, you see the numbers behind the remediation costs there. They have 5 or 6 numbers behind them, right? So I can't put enough emphasis on having that asbestos survey ready for us. When it comes to the disposal of the asbestos also is going to be a big deal. I should point out, I always like, in all my presentations, I always talk about the the University of Toronto's flood on July 8th, 2013. I don't know if you were all running a facility July 8th, 2013. That's when the water came down and you had to take a boat to get home, okay? The subway was closed, the Don Valley Parkway was closed, and every restorer was busy for the next 3 or 4 days, okay? The University of Toronto had a plan, and they had 40 buildings affected. 38 of the 40 buildings were open the next day. The only 2 that weren't were fallen asbestos. Okay, every other building was open, and that was, again, identifying the resources, having a decision maker with the authority to make decisions. Okay, for us, especially in these older buildings, my immediate scope of work, again, because I know you're going to have that Safe Tech, T. Harris, Pynchon coming in behind us. I have to drive this place to their approval and yours, okay? Knowing where the asbestos is at the beginning is the number one most important thing. And I don't know if you've ever noticed the reports that you get from them very often, that do they always include asbestos containing materials in their water damage report? Ironically, no. So you've called an environmental company to come and do the assessment for the environment, and they say what's wet here, what's wet there, the humidity's okay, no mold, et cetera, but they didn't identify the asbestos? What gives? Because that's actually a regulation by the law. So if there's one thing I would ask from you guys, that would be it. Also, criteria on mold. Some people just have a real heartburn about mold. So are you following the Canadian guidelines where if I just find a little bit of mold like this that I can use standard operating procedures and remove it and continue on? Or have you still got this obsolete idea where, any mold at all, you stop and put it on hold? If you do that, again, you've probably doubled the length of the job, et cetera, and under 10 square feet or under 1 square meter. With somebody with the proper tools should be able to take care of that on the spot and still be within all guidelines. But again, sometimes the people writing the guidelines are the people who benefit the most from you not doing that, right? So I just got to point that out. Other regulated substances that we see, lead paint. The big one coming up will be silica. So again, I've talked about carpet tiles many times. The next one is insulated walls. Very often you guys don't want us to take the baseboards off. If we take the baseboards off, the walls will dry quicker. If I take the baseboards off, I can take a sneak and see if the walls are insulated. If I see that the walls are insulated when I'm starting the job, I can probably save it. If we wait till tomorrow or the next day and wait to make that decision then, I'm probably tearing that wall out. There are a variety of different types of things that we can actually do to pump air in. So, these are simple. I would not use these in a normal job, but if I had to speed dry them, would I be able to put a bit of heat into the intake of that and blow heated air in there? Would that make a difference? Yes. And that's when you have a wall over asbestos containing wall type thing. That's where using this type of equipment is really beneficial with a little heat pumped in there. And then of course, floor drying systems with a desiccant. This is a desiccant dehumidifier over here. All kinds of different things that we can do to do floors. Now, the higher end commercial laminates can also be dried through this process. And I'm sure you probably haven't seen that before because there's no money in that, right? It's easy to change the laminate, easy to change the vinyls, etc. Carpet over pad. Anytime you have under pad, category 2 and 3 must go. The one thing I can assure you that will smell is carpet under pad on almost any category 2 water loss. So if there is carpet under pad, it should be removed. And when it comes to removing water from the underpad, believe it or not, we actually have 3 different devices in the marketplace that can remove moisture from the underpad through the carpet. The one on the left is called the Extreme Extractor, rarely seen in Canada. The one in the middle, that is called the Rover, fairly common in Canada. And on the one on the right, you would hope that any restorer would have a water claw. You would have a water claw, yes. Now, do they use it all the time? No. But when you need a water claw, boy, do you need a water claw. And when you have carpet like this, that's carpet with an attached backing, this will remove up to 65 to 85% of the moisture out of the underpad itself. They're specially devised. The funny part is if you've seen these used and it was not working the way I just described, it's because it's a guy running things. You know how guys are, more power, more this, more that, yeah! Unfortunately, when it comes to water claws, the medium-sized one works better. So, if they followed the instructions of the people selling it, you bought a medium one that worked great. If you bought the large one, it probably didn't work. The last thing I'm going to discuss really is cleaning of floors. The machinery that we use to clean carpets has really evolved over the last 5 years. They're heated, lots of pressure. What most people don't understand is we actually have attachments that can clean ceramic and all the other hard surfaces also with the same equipment, just different attachments. Oh, well, I don't really think it's that dirty. Well, the trick for us is really simple. If you have a ceramic tile that's been mopped several times, we'll go in with our spinner and put the word clean in the middle and leave. And I guarantee you're calling us back to clean that floor tonight because we can clean those things out well in this day and age. So when it comes to sewage backups and things like this, I would strongly encourage you guys to have them properly cleaned, and the technology is there now. And do all the people carry this stuff? No. And is it worth it? Absolutely. So if I ever can be of help to you, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you very much for listening to me, and have a great day.